Thank you so much for joining. Still see people trickling in. Thank you so much for joining. This is episode number 6 of the Unboxing AI webinar series by CARPL.ai. For those of you who don't know, CARPL is um, an enterprise imaging AI platform, the first of our kind to be cleared by the FDA. That essentially serves as a single link between your hospitals, your radiology departments, and the entire ecosystem of AI. Today, we are joined by Robert Lauritzen from our close collaborator, Cerebriu. Thank you, Robert, for joining. It's an honor, it's a privilege. We are big fans of your work. As I said, the first time I interacted with your CTO Akshay, who has become a close friend over the years, was almost 5 years ago. So we've seen a bit of the journey. So thank you, Robert, for joining.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Good to be here, Vito.
It's our pleasure. So before we dive in, a quick introduction to Robert. Robert is the CEO and co-founder of Cerebriu, which we know is an AI-driven radiology company in Copenhagen, with over 25 years in healthcare tech. It does not look like that, Robert, looking at you, if I may say so. But with over 25 years in healthcare tech, Robert has led the development of the Apollo Brain MR, of the Apollo Brain AI, which enhances brain MR imaging by automating critical data acquisition. I'm sure we'll go deeper into this as we go through the webinar. His focus on operational excellence has significantly improved workflow efficiency and patient outcomes. He has also fostered key partnerships with leading healthcare institutions across the globe. I'm sure we'll talk about that as well, to advance AI solutions for brain MR, including stroke management. Cerebriu's innovations include efforts to achieve faster, more accurate MRI diagnostics, and ultimately, believe it or not, but enabling an end-to-end MR scan in 5 minutes or less. So thank you, Robert, for joining us. Robert, as we were talking, prior to the webinar, we try to start this session by first telling the attendees, sorry, that please ask us questions. We are going to prioritize questions over everything else. You can use the Q&A panel that at least my marketing team loves, or you can just use the chat panel, whatever works. Please, the idea is to make this very much, as much as possible, a conversation. So please feel free to ask Robert all sorts of MR related. He has promised he can go as technical as we want. So anything that you have, please ask. So yes, Robert, regular listeners would be aware of this, and I told you before the session as well that we start by asking a very simple yet complex question of what do you do as you would explain to a 5-year-old?
Sure. Thanks. Thanks, Vito, for the introduction, and thanks everyone for participating today. I'm excited about being here and telling about Cerebriu and what we do, and share my thoughts on AI and healthcare in general. So, what do? We are changing the future of diagnostics, which is diagnostic imaging in terms of the ability to find critical disease, which today is a complicated procedure. What we're doing for tomorrow is with AI to make it possible for just about anyone in healthcare to perform such a diagnostic examination. And this sounds kind of complicated, but if you're a 5-year-old, your parents might remember having an analog camera, and it was really difficult to make pictures. And now we all have these smart little devices. You can't see it because of the background screen. And everyone can take pictures. I'm sure you even tried to take a picture. So basically what we're doing is enabling our healthcare system to take all the pictures necessary to make sure that disease can be discovered and revealed in time for treatment, so that more can be treated in a timely manner and with better outcomes for the patients.
That is actually a very interesting way of saying it, right? Like even a 5-year-old can take pictures today. Like I have 6-year-olds, and they take pictures all day long.
And
So,
they can make pretty good pictures.
oh yeah, tell me about it. Most of them are,
Yeah.
yeah, they're cute. Good, bad, ugly is a subjective term.
Exactly. Yeah, but the challenge is, right, that an MR tech, it takes like years and years to become a skilled MR tech and proficient. And we are way too few of them.
Yeah,
There are way too few radiologists, and there are way too few machines to really serve the general population all over the world.
yeah.
That's what we're
No, so
trying to
that
fix.
that let's get into it, Robert. How did you start Cerebriu? How did the idea strike, and what exactly is the offering today?
Yeah. Well, we started somewhat off to what we're doing today. We started out, I think, from the typical academic spin out of really good international contest winning segmentation technology for automatic reporting on volumetry in relation to, for instance, dementia and capturing biomarkers like atrophy, etc. And that was super cool. And when we talked to radiologists, and we actually did our first workshop before we had an office in India. We did a workshop with radiologists, and they thought that was a kind of cool technology, but it was difficult to really help out in the clinic because they did not use volumetry and segmentation in the routine. It was not going to really help in their workflow. It's not going to help them with the overarching problem that is that it's a way underserved population. And actually, that's the reality all over the world. 9 out of 10 really don't have affordable access to advanced diagnostic imaging like MRI, which means that they eventually don't get treated because they don't get diagnosed. So the real problem was more about workflow, and this is where we then pivoted. Actually, within the first few weeks after having raised funds and started the company, we pivoted with the team that we had, and we had 6 months to show some sort of value proposition that was more capturing in the clinic. And we decided back in the fall of 18, to focus intently on workflow. To try moving away from the diagnostic interpretation and looking into what's actually going on during MRI. And MRI are today like 30-minute plus procedures, complicated procedures that generate a lot of images, and most of those images are healthy and are clogging up the radiologist desktop, and they're spending a lot of time with patients on the table that quite often is unnecessary, typically also with contrast studies that are not necessary, et cetera, et cetera. So what we focused on was, what if we could apply the AI early on during acquisition while the patient's on the table? And what could we do from a lean perspective, to reduce the amount of overscanning, to reduce the amount of contrast, to reduce the amount of images and the time spent for the patient on the screen? What if we could do a
sorry,
5-minute
Robert, quick question. Lean, you mean the lean operational technique, like the production technique?
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
wow. Okay,
Lean
very
operating
interesting.
model.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been working in like 20 years in pharma and doing lean and different business verticals, and always applying technology and facilitating the information to support improved workflow and more efficiency workflows and reduced waste. So it's effectively, I mean, radiology is a production. You're getting patients in with orders, and then you're outputting a report. How do you get there with the least possible waste, least possible time, least possible recalls, least possible amount of data being generated, because they're not necessarily value adding? And this is really the approach that we applied with the advanced AI combined with this thinking in production, and really taking the main activities of radiology with planning, acquisition, interpretation, reporting, and then looking at it as discrete processes operating in the machine. So what do we learn? What new data is created in the machine as it generates and reconstructed images that may change what it is we're doing? And can we detect early on whether there's even something there worthwhile imaging or not? And this is really the paradigm shift that we applied.
So does that mean, Robert, so I will try to like articulate my understanding. Tell me if I'm right or wrong. So essentially, I'm a tech. I'm doing a brain MR. I start with, let's say, I'm just going to make this up. I start with a T2 SAG or a T2 axial, and your AI runs on it and says, if that's normal, then do this. If that's abnormal, then do something else. Is that
Yeah, and
how?
in principle, that's how it works, right? So it's incrementally, iteratively personalizing the imaging output and
Yeah.
presenting this information so that it is as easy as possible for the operator, the MR tech, to execute.
Oh, interesting. So it's possible that if I have a normal brain MR, let's say I'm a 35-year-old male or 30-year-old male, I have a normal brain MR. I just had a headache. I went got an MR done.
Yeah,
It's possible that scan is done in 4 minutes.
yeah,
Whereas, if I am an elderly gentleman with an infarct or a brain tumor or something, uh, it's possible that scan might be, say, 12 minutes or 15 minutes, depending on the level of detail.
yeah.
Is that oh, very
That is
interesting.
exactly right. Yeah. So
So
it's
that
so
also
it
means that
ensures that
from
it
a
gets right the first time, right? It's
yeah,
first time
no,
right image.
it's interesting because it's the opposite of standardization, right? Personalization is the opposite of standardization.
Yeah,
And there is this move globally, which is, I think, partially driven by operations and finance people, and then partially also driven by data science people, to say that, there should be standardization of MR acquisition. So everybody gets the same brain MR, irrespective of, whether they have a tennis ball in their head or if they have nothing. Uh,
hmm,
and I'm exaggerating, but I think you
yeah,
get the
yeah,
point,
yeah,
right? Uh,
yeah.
versus the other approach, which is something that happens here in India, in fact, where in many cases the radiologist is sitting next to the technologist and
Mm.
saying that, hey, do this, do that. Okay, let the guy come out. There's nothing, so is that a correct kind of analogy or correct understanding?
Yeah, yeah, to some extent, and I totally agree. There is a sort of a dichotomy in personalization and standardization. Although the standardization comes in the fact that it's micro standardization, so it's standardization
Ah,
not by symptom, but by visual cues during acquisition. So the whole point is actually to avoid a callback over imaging, which is sort of one approach to standardization. That is, if we just do a with and without contrast on everyone and acquire enough data, we never have to recall them. But then, we spend 16 minutes in the scanner every time. So that's a nice standard and nobody does that anymore because it's just not sustainable with the growing demand. And the other level of standardization is, let's try to do a 4 sequence scan, be done with 10 minutes on the table, a bit of reading, but we have enough data to handle all the cases without any findings, to rule out stuff, and we may have enough data to some very specific findings, but a lot of findings would have a callback. And then you have a
interesting.
callback, right? So what we're combining is the strength of those two by allowing the machine to be able to make the difference. So that's the change, and that's to avoid having to have the radiologist. A lot of places don't have radiologists by the
Yeah,
scanner, also in
yeah,
India,
yeah,
because of the volume. So the
yeah.
asynchronicity of read and imaging, and a lot of radiologists are now, even at the most well-staffed, are now at a place where they typically exceed 24 to 48 hours from imaging to read, which means a lot of
Yeah,
critical findings and acute findings are delayed and do cause callbacks.
that is so interesting, Robert. Like it's I have run imaging centers for almost a
Mm.
decade, and we took pride in the fact that we would do a personalized scan for every patient. And which basically means if there's a queue, you can do quick scans and rule out quickly, and
Yeah.
so you've essentially taken that and made it into an offering. From a regulatory standpoint, Robert, I'm just curious, like, would this would not be a diagnostic, tool, right? It's basically
No.
just a suggester of sorts.
Yeah, we're looking at it as a patient triaging tool during
Hmm.
acquisition. So patients
Hmm.
either have or don't have significant findings that warrant some action. And the proposed recommended protocol is really just tapping into the whatever clinical protocol is preferred at that particular site. So if you ran a diagnostic imaging center for patients doing routine brain MRI, if the radiologists found a tumor, a suspected tumor
Hmm.
during acquisition, they would do a contrast study and add the T1s and the T2s and all that, and sagittal and all the angles. They'll know all that by heart or look up your local protocol for that kind of finding. And this is effectively what we're just automating. So we're making the scanners into these clinically intelligent robots. I mean, really changing half a century of dumb cameras into a future where the camera can make the right image the first time,
Yeah.
independent of the operator, and the level of advancements of the operator, and certainly without requiring the presence of a radiologist.
Nice. So Robert, as an AI platform, we have to ask you about integration, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I think, even as an AI developer, if I was to call you an AI developer, uh, I think, like, how do you integrate with the scanner? Like, you mentioned you have the picture behind you
Mm.
of Apollo running on an MR scan. Like, how does that happen? Like, is it DICOM in, DICOM out? Is it, what's the system there?
Yeah.
As much as you can disclose,
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's certainly a lot of details I can't disclose in terms of the system integration we're doing with the MR console, but in general, it's DICOM in, DICOM out. In general, we're tagging and flagging and segmenting on secondary captures and can provide that in various formats. But the input is really just the initial sequences of the DICOMs generated and reconstructed by the MR machine. On the background here, you see it running as a standalone. That's just a front end and on a HTML front end, but effectively we're integrating into the MRI consoles. I mean,
Mhm.
our partnership with Siemens is public. So there we are seamlessly integrating our AI into the MRI machines of the future of Siemens, launching the
Wow.
first clinically intelligent MRI in
Wow.
soon.
I trust me, I know.
Yeah.
No, so Robert, again, sorry, we'll come to Siemens. I'm very curious about that. I'm sure folks listening in are as well. But so this means that you need, like, series one is acquired, push to you, inference runs, give some kind of output, then the tech configures series two, inference runs. Whereas generally, like, many times techs will go ahead and just, like, run the first uh, sequence, and as the first sequence is running for, say, a minute and a half, they'll plan the others on the localizer. Like, do you see that as a challenge at all? Like, one is, how do you deal with inference time? And that's also a
Mm,
question from Abhishek. Abhishek
mm.
handles AI integration at CARPL, so he's asking about the turnaround time for inferencing, and how do you meet the infrastructure requirements. So,
Yeah.
related question, uh, how have you seen the tech workflow evolve, and how do you manage the turnaround time that probably, you know, drives a lot of that workflow?
Yeah. No, it's very MR specific, obviously, right? So for those of you on the call that are not familiar with MRI, but more familiar with sort of like 2D imaging from X-ray or 3D X-ray, which is CT, MRI is multimodal in the sense that there are many different sequences, which each have their own characteristics and strengths in terms of determining certain aspects of soft tissue that may or may not be pathological. And what we're doing is exactly as you're saying, Vidur. We're looking at the sequences that, as they've reconstructed, we have a short turnaround time. We're executing with an incredibly small footprint, which is an art, I think, to get to that stage, so that it is real time relevant, but it's still running during a sequence, right? So we have one in sequence in, or a number of sequences in, then while the tech is taking a sequence, we do the inference. But before that sequence is complete, we provide the result as to agree or not agree and to continue. So the operational environment may not make it possible to personalize the imaging protocol. There may be too long a list or queue. It might not be an urgent finding, so you need to prioritize a recall instead. But at least you are aware, and the medical professionals can handle the patient differently when knowing that there's a suspected tumor, even if you actually stop the sequence, right? So the point here is that it has to be operationally efficient and run on the computer, on the console, so that it's real time and relevant for the MR tech. They can't spend 5-10 minutes waiting for it to bounce back to PACS and up to the cloud. So this is part of the implementation, which is.
So what sequence, Robert, does Cerebriu run on? Like, do you run on like multiple sequences or
it's multi-sequence, multi-sequence, multi-findings. So it depends on the body part, but in the brain, we've identified the absolute minimum sequences that all centers across the globe that we've talked to use always. In different order, doesn't matter, but at least they should be doing that, like the flare, the diffusion, etc. And those sequences we use as sort of an offset, and then we can interpret following sequences to get more precise and more specific. And then there's other stuff coming up in our pipeline that's going to be pretty exciting and mind-blowing, to be honest. But
No, Robert, I think that's a good segue to the next question. This is Dr. Anjali Agrawal. She is one of the most preeminent ER radiologists in the world, one of the pioneers in teleradiology as well. So she asks, a tool of this level of complexity involving prediction with regards to perhaps omitting certain parts of a standard protocol would need stringent testing. Could you provide some insights into how the tool is actually built? Maybe something around training data, findings, what kind of training data, and then maybe a little bit on testing of such a product as well.
Yeah. Ooh, that was a very broad question. So I think so first of all, I think the minimum sequences that any country we've been in require and reimburse are 4 sequences. Also for brain MRI. Yeah. So we're not saying go to 3 sequences and stop. We're saying, if we find something and you've reached the 4th sequence, it may be more appropriate clinically to continue because we found it something like a suspected intracranial hemorrhage or a tumor or an infarct, and then to ensure that the radiologist gets that additional data which would be required to actually do a differential diagnosis to some extent, right? So it could be adding a TOF or MRA if it's an infarct or whatever it might be, or do contrast studies, etc. So we're not at this stage saying stop in no matter what the case after 4 minutes or 3 minutes or 5 minutes in the scanner. But if we find something, at least you have the opportunity to do something about it while the patient's there and avoid a callback without having to have a radiologist by the table. If you're in the emergency department, this could be quite helpful also for the referring physicians, the neurologists, the ED nurses, and we actually just completed a pilot in an emergency department. We're using MR first to rule in, rule out stroke. And this just helps the flow in that emergency department tremendously, because suddenly the neurologists and the ED nurses, can get a confirmation that yes, it looks like there is a stroke, or no, that we didn't find a stroke. So, you can contact the radiologist if there is suspected stroke and talk about what to do about that. And if there is no suspected stroke, then you don't have to call every 5 minutes to hear if there's a result. But then you can look at the clinical symptoms and the conditions and take a more sort of advised decision at that point, right? But we're not diagnostic. We're not really at this point claiming that we can do a 3-sequence scan.
So basically, Robert, what you're saying is that, and Cerebriu is a radiologist assisting a tech in a way.
Yeah, it's like a tech co-pilot, which is effectively clinically
like a clinical tech, clinical co-pilot for the tech.
Yeah.
Interesting. That is super cool. We have an anonymous question. Somebody who's scared of disclosing their name, possibly from my team. Uh,
That happens.
so this one asks, what are your current pain points or inefficiencies in deploying and scaling your application? Like,
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, I think when we started, there were not a lot of platform providers like CARPL. And our early pilots, the whole IT barrier, the data security, cybersecurity, data protection, data privacy, all these aspects with legal and procurement, et cetera, they're a big barrier. Now, with platform providers, that becomes somewhat easier because we can integrate and we can provide that sort of part of the value proposition through a platform provider or like a distributor like CARPL, but effectively the pain points and inefficiencies of having multiple screens for the techs and for the radiologists is the biggest challenge. So there, the seamless integration on the MR console, of course, is the key resolution for that pain point, and that's allowing us to deploy at scale.
Wow. So you become part of the Siemens. I think it's called the Singo OS, right?
They had this open workflow technology, Cerebriu, et cetera. This whole sort of approaches they're building into the scanners as well.
Yeah.
So that allows us to do this. It's not a trivial thing, but of course.
And the install is done by the Siemens team.
Yeah, it can be done by the local,
like the field of applications engineer. Yeah. Nice. We've got two more questions, Robert. We'll try to go through these really quickly. One is, do you conduct unpublished industry research on new architectures in medical imaging, similar to vision transformers by Meta and Google? And, are they showing promising results?
Yes.
Probably can't answer that.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. It's kind of difficult to go into the unpublished details, but yes, we are, and some of it we will publish, and some of it we will not.
Yeah. No, got it. Awesome. And the last is last for now is by Abhishek again, who's like, does the order of sequence acquisition affect the accuracy of the model, or are there some recommendations for sequence that you recommend that give the best results?
Oh, that's good question. Very technical. No, the order does not matter. There are, and we do have some parameter thresholds where we know that the performance can be impacted, but we don't. I mean, we can use just 2D image sets and operate with that. So we're incredibly robust in that sense. Also in terms of field strength. So we've tested on ultra low field, and it translates without any training on ultra low field, by the way.
Oh, translates without training. Wow, that's a separate webinar in itself.
I think it's a separate, but yeah, we did a showcase at ECR, an academic paper, and also demoed the hyperfine integration at RSNA last year.
Wow. We have one more question which we'll probably answer online. So Robert, we put all of these questions on our community and then we'll answer it there. But just parting thoughts, since we try to end on time, parting thoughts, if I am a youngster, 21, 22-year-old, either engineer, med student, what advice would you give me if I'm considering entering this not so easy world of radiology AI?
No, a really good question, and I really encourage people to be entrepreneurial and go in there because there's a lot of problems to fix. But I think the three things that are really, really important: make sure that you really understand the problem and the market of that problem, so that you understand this, if there's any willingness to pay, and make sure that you have a multidisciplinary team. So we're across, AI and clinical team. About half of our staff are clinical, so that you can understand the domain. It's not just about understanding technology. And last, make sure that you have enough funding to back you up a long time, because it is not a short-term endeavor. and it is very expensive.
Yeah. No, on that happy note, thank you so much, Robert, for joining.
You're welcome.
Thank you to everyone who joined. This is going to go on YouTube sometime next week, so feel free to share it. And Robert, very insightful, very unique solution. We study the entire ecosystem, right? And Cerebriu has stood out from day one. So
Yeah,
congratulations
thanks.
on that, and congratulations on Siemens. We hope to see that running, Cerebriu running on many scanners across the world, and we probably won't even know. So,
Yeah, exactly.
so
That's
thank
how
you so
it
much,
should be.
Robert.
You're welcome. Good to see you,
Means a
Vidar.
lot.
Thanks for
Thank
inviting me.
you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.